Friends, we reach now the level of the sixth lecture, and the title of this lecture is Tom Jones as a Novel of Realism. This term may have been familiar with you, but it's a slightly problematic term. It's from real, so whatever is shown as real can also be the basis of realism. All of us know that when ism is put at the end of a word, then it starts showing a number of ideas. So real is one thing. Real is that you see, that you hear, that you touch, that you taste. That is, you use your senses, 5 senses to understand what is there in front of you. Realism is about ideas. I see something, you see something, somebody else sees something, and all of us see that reality in a different way, and we have our own views. Which is real? Then there is one can go into a tradition of the real, that it was shown as real 100 years ago. Today it is shown as real, and it might be shown after 100 years in a different manner, and yet it will be real. So that is real in fact, which is the reigning kind of, the crucial kind of reality. So all reality is not real. All reality is not realism. So it's a philosophical concept, and that's what I thought. Now that's why I thought that Tom Jones should be understood as a realistic novel, as a novel of realism, even though it doesn't show things which are seen only, but also felt, and feeling you can't understand. How does one feel? Whether one feels is right or wrong. All these questions arise. Therefore, realism is very simple to look at for the first time, and it's a very difficult thing when finally you have to find out whether it's realistic or not. Many of the things are sold, are made available to people in the name of realism, and it is left to you to find out which of those realisms is actually acceptable by us. So with this particular problem, we start this discussion about Tom Jones as a novel of realism. So the first thing is, I'll just explain this idea. Realism in fiction is more than realistic depiction. Depiction is showing. Depiction is presenting. And fiction itself is, as I said in one of the first lectures, that fiction is supposed to be unreal, but then we are discussing realism in fiction. So a lot of conundrum, a lot of mixing up, but then you have to find out as we discuss further as to what exactly is realism in the context of this novel. It's not exactly, I say, about social detailing. So social details don't make it realistic. For instance, I can give the instance from a room where there are chairs and tables, where there are books, where there's a ceiling, there are walls, the walls have colors, there is a floor. Is that real room? It appears to be real, but that room is not real, because the room also has to be decided by what is the aim of keeping a room, because maybe it's a classroom. In that case, the reality of the room will not be just the walls, but the students who sit there. Therefore, realism is something that is to be understood with different aspects in mind. I say it's not exactly about social detailing. You just give a few details and you say this is real, that is not real. Or then referring to surface happenings, which I already explained to you, the wall, the chairs, the books, etc. And things happening there. Something is removed from one place and put at another place. That is not realism. Realism is something different, something deeper, and that is to be understood with discussion. Detailing is not real. Referring to surface happenings is and is not real. It is real because you actually saw those things, but then there is something else that is not seen, that is not real. Society at the time the novel was composed, that society is supposed to be real. And this is the purpose of the writer, to make the novel realistic. And only the realistic novel will be interesting. All that is shown to you may bore you, in fact, may just test your patience. So that's not real. Real is that which also evokes interest in you. Then, instead, realism has breadth of scope. What is breadth of scope? You can see, something from top to bottom. If you're standing in somewhere near a forest, then you can just have a longer view of the forest. There is a tree at the end, there is grass just next to you, and the entire thing that is in front of you. And the more broad your perspective is, the more can you understand the reality and the truth of the forest. So realism has breadth of scope that raises a vision. Once again, you see something and then you take it in your mind and there you process it, and then it becomes an idea. Now test that idea, whether that idea was there in the case of other people also who saw it or not, and then compare the idea. And finally you'll reach a conclusion, and that conclusion will be real. So reality is not just individual, it's also social. It's also the vision of 10 or 15 people put together, who will then discuss and find out whether they actually saw the real or whether it was something else. So a vision is a kind of an idea, asserting hope and positive norms. I think I'm becoming more and more difficult. I've brought in the idea of hope and positive norms. Most of the people in today's world are disturbed. They are annoyed. They are sad. They are violent. They are quarrelsome. So what is real? If you have people with hope and positive norms, and at the same time you have angry people around you, then what is real? Then you see the idea of attitude comes in. That hope means that you have learned something good yesterday and you are working for something good tomorrow. So I think that is more real. What do you say? What do you think? What is your idea? Hope is actually inbuilt in reality. If you don't have any hope, if you just believe in suicide, if you believe in killing others, then that is not real. That is only some kind of an indication of a disease in society. But if you want to see health in society, then only you are real. Sometimes health is not seen in society. It doesn't mean it's not there. In fact, if you look at a social scene and you find that everybody is bad, then is that society real? I would say no, that society is not real, because that society doesn't tell you that what is there in front of you, which is bad, can also be corrected. It can be corrected. So, real in that sense will be where the bad thing is recognized and where the possibility of good is also understood. It's a difficult idea. Let me tell you how. If the whole society is bad, if the whole society is rotten, then a kind of literature is written that gives you despair. There are a large number of books in the 20th century which expressed a sense of despair. Where are they today? A new generation of readers has come. A new generation of citizens has come. Those citizens still want to live. They have scope to live. This thing was not realized by those who lost hope yesterday. Therefore, I say that in the long range, humanity wants to live. Humanity wants to survive. Humanity wants to find answers. If there are no answers today, it doesn't mean there will be no answers tomorrow. Actually, if you go into history, you will see that 1,000 years ago, people were really badly provided with things, and they thought that there was no answer anywhere. But then finally answer was found. If you have this kind of a history, and today you see that history hidden somewhere in some corner of life, then only you will be able to create good literature, hopeful literature, positive literature, and thus realistic literature. I don't know whether this idea is still clear or not, but I'll carry on with the discussion to tell you that this novel actually is driven by the idea of hope and positive norms, in spite of the fact that many of the characters in this novel do not follow the path that is positive. So I say the use of typical characters would greatly help in understanding what reality is. What are typical characters? That's a question that the writers have to answer for us. We as readers have to raise these questions for us. What is a typical character? Typical character, I would explain a typical character is that which typifies other characters. Like, there is a student in a class. Now, this student has the characteristics of students in another college. It also has a characteristic of being in another place. Later on, there might even be an American student, there might be a European student, there might be a Russian student. So the student part is typical. So if you catch a character who is supposed to be a student, then you can show traits which are common to all the students. This is called the typical character. Most of the writing does not talk about typical characters. They say, I'm talking about this person with this name, he was born there, he had such parents, and things like that. But then, when the writer starts explaining to us the other things about the student, and we start relating with him. For instance, this student met another student, and then they became friends, and they started working together. Then a common enemy occurred, and they fought against him. Then straight away you say, oh, this thing has happened in my town also. Somebody else will say this happened in that country also. And finally, that student or those two students actually become typical students for all others. They are representative. So the writing that shows representation of society through characters is realistic writing. You can read a novel and you can pick up 4 or 5 characters and then start relating with them. And then you say that you can relate better with some. Those with whom you can relate better are the typical characters because they live in you. You recognize them as a part of you. So that is what typical characters mean. And therefore I say that one of the indicators of a novel being realistic is that it has characters with which you can relate. So that will help. And if you can relate with characters, then you will be driven by some of the ideals that those characters pursued, and therefore it will be a message of hope from those characters to you because you can relate. If you can't relate, then it's a kind of despair. Therefore, try to understand a realistic novel from the point of view of those characters being interesting and such that you can relate to them, you can identify yourself with them. Then I go to the point of the sweep of Tom Jones. And I say that because the word is italicized, therefore I am talking about the novel, not about the character. So what is the sweep of this novel? This novel, starts with the days of youth of Tom Jones, the character, and even before that, when he was born and when he was left at the door of Mr. Allworthy as a child. That is when the novel begins. But from there, it starts expanding in scope. It starts expanding in sweep. You have a young child who has got a foster father, Mr. Allworthy. Mr. Allworthy, who is a landlord, who is a squire, who is a PowerPoint, who is a power center in the novel, and that family that he guides actually has connections with other families. Then there is in the rural landscape, then there are other estate owners and there are other squires, and from there on you have other towns. From those towns, there is a distance between one town and another, and there are roads, and people are moving from one place to another. All that is called the sweep of the novel. And you'll realize that the sweep of Tom Jones is big because when the discussion, when the presentation, when the depiction of characters has shifted from one individual to another, one place to another, one set of characters to another, then the novel starts expanding in its sweep. And that's what happens, let's say, in the first 100 pages of the novel. Then it talks at length about the countryside. So from there, from the estate of Mr. Allworthy, it goes to the countryside where the peasants live, and there are peasant women, there are peasants, and they are actually connected with market on one side and with other villages on the other. And this movement of the people on the road, and the road is occupied by carriages, horse-driven carriages, and where that there is a kind of meeting point of all the different characters in the novel, and they talk, and they tell lies, and they gossip, and they fight, and they quarrel. All this is there in the countryside, and that is well captured in this novel. So the length and breadth of the country is actually mapped by this novel. So the villages where conditions of simple and innocent living exist, that is shown in the novel, and most of the England exists there. England is there in the cities, but most of the England is there in the villages and small towns. And together, all these things make a unit, which becomes a political unit, which becomes an economic unit, which becomes a social unit. And the writer is able to bring all this under his influence in order to enlighten the dark areas of society. And the dark areas are areas which are not within the reach of the intelligent people, the intelligentsia. But then the writer, as a part of the intelligentsia, takes you, readers, to the villages where a different kind of life exists. So this is a point that one is able to get struck by in the novel, and this should be kept in mind while discussing the novel as a piece of realism. The other point is that Fielding put to use the life on the road. Now this is important. Very few novels would talk about the road in England. The road is long, the road is varied, it splits into smaller road. It also goes to a big road that will take you to the center of life, center of cultural life in England, that is London. So one road to another, and on the road there are hurdles, there are carriages, there are robberies, and there are swindlings, there are inns where people stay for the night and go the next day. And in the inns there is a kind of game that is going on, buying and selling is there. Money is being earned, there are innkeepers, there are servants, and the variety and the multiplicity of life that is there in England, that is there on show in the novel itself. And you will see that the writer's imagination is so vast that he is able to take care of the idiosyncrasies and the main features of all the characters that he picks up for presentation. So Fielding has that kind of vision which takes in as many characters as there are in England, connected with the road that he is going to depict, and that shows that the road becomes an important aspect of the novel. Now, can I also present road as a symbol? Road as something else. Road as showing, an aspect which generally is hidden from our eyes. I think that is the case because the road is the social place. It's the social space. People in different, roles approach the road to go from one place to another, to hide themselves from one place and then to go there and meet new people and meet new challenges. And every turn of the road becomes a different facet of reality. So that road is shown at length. Pages after pages, you have people walking on the road, traveling by the road, and then understanding things from their own angle. And this keeps the reader moving from one place to another. So there, in that case, there is a dynamism, there is a movement. There is no static moment in the novel, and that because the place keeps moving, therefore the idea of the reader and the author indirectly also keeps moving from one part to another. A moving mind, a mind that is taking in differences, a mind that is going into the different ideas and planes of life, that mind actually is a dynamic mind, and that is there in this novel. This provides him Fielding, with a chance to capture variety and wealth of description. So you read this novel, and it seems that it would give you a feeling that actually you are there in the 18th century, and that you are going from one place to another, and that the 18th century actually is a kind of history now, but it is alive in the pages of this novel. 18th century history, 21st century point of view, because the reader is in the 21st century. So actually, the sweep becomes much bigger because the 21st century is being then joined with the 18th century and the way people lived at that time. The novel affords a panoramic view of society. What is the panoramic view? Panoramic view is that there is a kind of a paper, there is a kind of a surface, and that surface shows one part, then the second part, then the third part, and finally the whole thing is covered. So from one part to another, the point has been explained in the context of the road earlier, but then you can say that the purpose of the novelist is to cover the entire variety of life in England at that point of time, and the space actually is the center of panorama. So you see the top, then the middle, then the end, then the left side, then the right side, and things move, and then once again the same top, the same left side, and like this, as if a film is capturing things in some kind of a dynamic movement from one point to another. And when you reach the end of the picture, then you can see that all those things that you saw join with one another in the vital sense. So that is the panoramic view. So I suggested the range is vast. This novel is not about a street. This is not about a village. This is not about a corner of England. This is about the whole of England. And the whole of England is captured through space and through the variety of characters. So if you have in the city a person who came from a village, then that person is carrying a whole village inside him. And when he talks to you, then he will be talking from that angle of the village from where he came. And therefore, all the characters actually become walking villages, walking streets, walking houses. So through their behavior, you can in fact visualize the variety and the richness of life as lived in England in the 18th century. So this is what I suggest, and when you put all these things together, then you understand the reality of England. And that reality is the subject of our discussion today, because we are discussing realism of the novel. Economy. You can see shops, you can see buying and selling, you can see productive process, you can see fields, you can see people who live in hills, and there they have lived all their time. And they earned money, and sometimes they lost money. They starved sometime and they prospered at another time. And they came in touch with others who helped them and did not help them. This is economy. Shopkeepers, buyers, sellers, producers, and those who are bereft of any of these things and were starving. This is what economy is. What is society? Society is that where people meet each other, and there they strike relationships. And sometimes the relationship is not friendly, but also enemy-like. So they fight. And there are many shades of culture. So there is a culture of openness. There can also be a culture of orthodoxy. There can also be a culture of intolerance. So whether it's intolerance, prejudice, orthodoxy, friendship, openness, all these things are shown in the novel. And they are shown as moving from one corner to another. So maybe in one part of England at that time, some kind of a fair is going on, and at in another part, some kind of mourning is happening. In a third, there is a group that is sitting and listening to a preacher. In the fourth, that there is a marriage party, and so on and so forth. So all that variety which is inherent in social living actually is of interest for the writer of this novel. So I talk about economy, I talk about society, and shades of culture. Culture which gives you values, which talks about happiness, which talks about togetherness, where you sing and dance, where you're enjoying yourself and celebrating the big events of life. All that is there in this novel. They are shown as moving from one corner to another. Then we are shown the 17th century details merging organically with those in the 18th century. You see, you cannot straight away say that when you reach 1700, then the 18th century has begun. That is there only on paper. But actually, in the 1701, you have the same kind of life that was there 2 years ago, even though that was in a different century. So these demarcations between one century and another are only for us, and only made by us. Otherwise, life flows in a kind of continuum. So when you live in the 18th century in England, then actually you are also a part of the 17th century. But I ask a different question then. What about the 19th century? Is there 19th century in the 18th century? This is a question I ask from you. This is a question I ask from myself. My answer is that 18th century also has in it the seeds of the 19th century. Those people who are angry, who want, for instance, if men and women want to learn by attending schools, and there are no schools in the 18th century. But they want to go to schools. So there are 2 or 3 schools and they are multiplying. What is actually happening? In the seed form, education is there in the 18th century, and in the 19th century, the same education will flower, will become some kind of a big natural development. So you will see that this novel also carries the seeds of future. It also, for instance, Tom Jones is revolting against many things in the 18th century. And you can see people revolting today in the 21st century against many things. So don't you think that there is a kind of Tom Jones in all of us who want to learn, who can fall for, let's say, temptations, and who can also learn the bad aspect of temptations and correct ourselves? If Tom Jones can do it, we also can do it. Which means that Tom Jones belongs as much to the 18th century as he belongs to the 21st century. So that way, you know, the novel, which is expanding in scope and connecting with the coming years in the realm of possibility. Possibly, 21st century is there in the 18th century. That idea of possibility, will you call it real or not? You see, will you call real only that which you can see with eyes and hear with ears? Or will you also call that real which is possible but not present today? This is a question I pose to myself. What is your answer? My answer is that if I see that it is possible tomorrow, then that is a part of reality. If reality is that big, if reality is that vast, if reality is that productive, then it is real. So don't restrict reality to what is available to your senses today. You actually think of reality that also is present in your mind as something that will grow tomorrow. So always try to combine your senses with your mind. And when you combine your senses with mind, then in fact you are combining the memory that is there as hard disk in the mind. So the hard disk might have information and data of the 10th century, of the 8th century, 1,000 years ago. That my memory is there. In this memory is actually frozen in books also. If there is a book written in the 18th century, that 18th century book tells you about the 18th century today. So that way, if the expanse is widened, and if all these things are put together as some kind of a totality, then you have the picture of reality. So reality is not just one part. Reality is the whole picture. And the whole picture is not complete. Therefore, some completion will occur after 100 years. So which means that the whole reality also is open. So it's not a closed reality. These are the ideas that actually belong to realism, and literature in general, and poetry as well as fiction in particular. They tell us about not just today but also tomorrow, because tomorrow is a part of us. Tomorrow is there as in the seed form in our minds and in our reality. Towards the end of this lecture, towards the end of the novel, the reader is taken to the life and ways of cities of London. On surface, the London life offers a contrast to the countryside, but as one sees deeper, one comes across the deceit and humbugs as well as the vacuity of life corresponding well with what witnessed in villages and small towns. So now I'm coming to combine all that is there in England in smaller parts, so that the bigger picture of the country becomes clear before us. And that's what is happening towards the end. The novel is ending somewhere in London. And London well attracts people from all parts of England. And therefore, in a crystallized form, it has the whole of England breathing, in fact, clearly in front of the eyes of the audience. We see the novel steeped in the reality of English life, from the upper stratum to lower countryside. But as one sees deeper, one comes across the deceit and humbugs. This I think we have covered. So we see the novel steeped in the reality of English life, from the upper stratum to the village, through the road, onto the city of London thereafter. Shall we call the novel giving us a social history? Let us accept that Fielding is curious to know as well as eager to tell things that are changing in the time span he chose to depict. This showing of change makes him truly historical in vision. And then I conclude by saying, at the level of characters, attitude, clash, we witness an old orderliness wearing thin and making space for a bold as well as a vibrant England. So this point has been already explained by me, that from the past you move to the present, and from the present you can project still further what is going to come tomorrow. So one example is the love growing between Tom and Sophia has this symbolic significance of recognizing novelty and openness against blind adherence to hierarchy. Finally, Tom and Sophia unite, they join. And see the joining of Tom and Sophia. Sophia comes from the higher classes. Tom is a foundling. He is without a parentage. Towards the end, it is known that he also was actually from the Allworthy family. But that doesn't matter for us at the end of the novel. What we know is that Tom decided to be in love with Sophia even when he was poor and she was rich. And she also accepted him as her lover, even though she was rich and he was poor. So symbolic significance of this is that you are recognizing new ideas. It's not possible in the 18th century for a woman of that station to marry a person of unknown parentage, but the writer is showing it. And what writer showed in the 18th century became clear in the 19th and 20th centuries. So you have that kind of truth present in the novel and its pages. In vision, the novel is clearly greater than the sum of its parts. We recognize the picture of a resurgent England moving ahead on an epic scale. It's a novel that way, like an epic. The way you read Ramayana and Mahabharata, the way you read the Greek epics, the same way this novel also can be read. Because it's about generations, it's about large chunks of time, it's about bigger problems of life, about revolt, about hatred, about love, about getting together. So all these big themes, inspire us about the world in which we live, and therefore we call this novel a realistic novel in the true sense of the word. I hope you have got the points that I made, and therefore we come to the end of it. Thank you.